June 6, 1944. 4:31 a.m. Normandy coast, France. The wind comes first. Cold, wet, relentless. It slices across the English Channel and slams into the concrete spine of Hitler's so-called impenetrable fortress, the Atlantic Wall. A German sentry tightens his coat, boots crunching against damp gravel as he scans the horizon. His name is Gefreiter Karl Weiss, 19 years old, barely trained, stationed in a concrete bunker overlooking a stretch of beach codenamed Omaha, by men he has never seen. Through his field glasses, nothing. Just black water. Just fog. Just the illusion of safety. Behind him, embedded in the cliffs and dunes, stretches one of the most expensive military engineering projects in history. Over 15,000 bunkers, millions of mines, steel hedgehogs, concrete gun emplacements, artillery batteries capable of shredding ships before they reach shore. The Atlantic Wall wasn't just a defense line. It was supposed to be the end of the war. Berlin had poured billions into it. Forced labor from across occupied Europe. Endless concrete shipments. Months of backbreaking work. All to create one thing, a coastline that no army could cross. And yet, Karl lowers the binoculars. Something feels wrong. Miles away, beneath the black sky, the sea is no longer empty. It moves, not waves, shapes, hundreds of them, no thousands. The largest amphibious invasion force in human history surges silently toward the French coast. Battleships, destroyers, landing craft packed with soldiers gripping rifles so tight their knuckles turn white. Engines rumble beneath the waterline. Orders whispered, prayers muttered. Men vomit over the sides. At the center of it all is the operation that will decide the fate of Europe. D-Day. Back on the cliffs, Karl hears it. A distant hum. Low. Constant. He freezes. Turns. Looks skyward. First there's nothing. Then a flicker. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Engines. The sky begins to fill with dark shapes. Aircraft flying low and fast. Paratroopers. Gliders. Bombers. The air itself seems to vibrate as the first explosions erupt inland. Karl stumbles backward. This isn't a raid. This isn't a probe. This is something else. Something massive. Something unstoppable. He fumbles for the field telephone. Feindliche Flugzeuge. Überall. Enemy aircraft. Everywhere. But the line crackles. Dead. Cut hours earlier by Allied commandos who slipped behind the lines in the dark. Karl doesn't know it yet, but the Atlantic Wall has already begun to fail. Months earlier, November 1943, northern France. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel steps out of his staff car, boots hitting wet sand. He doesn't look impressed. He studies the defenses in silence. Concrete bunkers face the sea like blind giants. Massive guns sit in reinforced casemates. Rows of obstacles stretch across the beach. Metal crosses, wooden stakes tipped with mines, designed to rip open landing craft. To most German officers, it looks perfect. To Rommel, it looks incomplete. He kneels, grabs a handful of sand, lets it slip through his fingers. The war will be won or lost on these beaches, he says quietly. His officers exchange glances. Rommel isn't worried about the strength of the wall. He's worried about where it will break. Because he understands something others in Berlin don't. The Atlantic Wall isn't a single wall. It's a patchwork. Uneven. Inconsistent. Rushed. Some sectors are heavily fortified. Others barely defended. And the enemy only needs to find one. Rommel orders changes immediately. More mines. More obstacles. More beach defenses. He wants the shoreline turned into a killing field before Allied troops can even step onto sand. But there's a problem. Time. And worse, command disagreement. High command, led by men loyal to Adolf Hitler, believes the main invasion will come at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point between Britain and France. Not Normandy. Not here. Rommel disagrees. But his authority is limited. Resources are stretched. Decisions are delayed. And the wall remains imperfect. Back to June 6, 1944. 4:47 a.m. Karl Weiss grips his rifle now, heart pounding. The horizon is no longer empty. It's alive. Silhouettes of ships emerge through the mist, rows upon rows, stretching farther than he can see. His breath catches. This is it. The invasion. The one they said might never come. He turns toward the bunker, shouting for his squad. Alarms begin to sound along the coastline. Searchlights flicker on. Artillery crews scramble to their guns. Officers shout conflicting orders. Some units are ready. Others are confused. Many are still asleep. Because despite all its concrete, steel, and cost, the Atlantic Wall has one fatal weakness. It depends on perfect coordination. And in the chaos of war, perfection doesn't exist. The first naval shells hit seconds later. The earth explodes beneath Karl's feet. Concrete cracks. Sand erupts into the air. The wall begins to shake. And as the first landing craft lower their ramps onto the beaches of Normandy, the illusion of an impenetrable fortress starts to collapse. Not because it was weak, but because it was flawed in ways no one fully understood. Not yet. June 6, 1944, 5:12 a.m. Omaha Beach. The sea is no longer dark. It burns. Naval shells from Allied battleships slam into the coastline, ripping open bunkers, collapsing trenches, and throwing sand and steel into the air. The thunder is constant, so loud it drowns out screams. Gefreiter Karl Weiss is on the ground now, ears ringing, face pressed into wet sand as debris rains down around him. His bunker, his fortress, is still standing, but the world around it is falling apart. Out at sea, the ramps drop. American soldiers pour into chest-deep water under a storm of machine gun fire. Some don't even make it 2 steps. Others push forward, dragged down by gear, bullets tearing through the surf. And yet, they keep coming, because this is the plan. Overwhelm the wall. Exploit its weaknesses. Break through before Germany can react. But here's what Karl, and thousands of German defenders, were never fully told. The Atlantic Wall was never truly a wall. Not in the way it was imagined in Berlin. Not in the way propaganda described it. It wasn't continuous. It wasn't uniform. It wasn't even complete. It was a scattered chain of strongpoints, some heavily fortified, others dangerously exposed. A fortress made of gaps. Months earlier, January 1944, northern France. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stands over a large operations map. Colored pins mark defensive positions along the coast. At a glance, it looks solid. But Rommel sees the truth. He begins removing pins. Here, he says, a gap. And here, another. And here, more. Entire stretches of coastline, kilometers long, where defenses are thin, outdated, or still under construction. His officers shift uneasily. One of them speaks. Field Marshal, the enemy cannot land everywhere. Rommel doesn't look up. They don't have to. This is flaw 1. The Atlantic Wall was not a continuous defensive line. It was a network, and networks have weak points. The German High Command believed geography would compensate. Cliffs, tides, narrow beaches, natural barriers that would funnel any invasion into predictable zones, where heavy defenses did exist, especially at Pas-de-Calais. The logic was simple: force the enemy into kill zones, destroy them before they can spread out. But that assumption carried a hidden risk. If the enemy didn't land where expected, the wall's strength became irrelevant. Back to Normandy. 5:26 a.m. At Omaha Beach, the Americans are dying in the hundreds. Machine guns from elevated bunkers cut through wave after wave. Artillery shells land with terrifying precision. For a moment, it looks like the wall is working, exactly as designed. Karl Weiss fires his rifle now, barely able to see through smoke and chaos. His training kicks in. Load. Fire. Again. 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 But something is wrong. He notices it slowly. At first, it's just movement, small groups of soldiers slipping between fields of fire. Then more. They're not charging directly. They're spreading out, finding low ground, using craters, using the terrain, because even here, one of the strongest sectors of the wall, there are gaps, blind spots, angles the defenses can't cover. A machine gun crew to Karl's left suddenly goes silent. Not destroyed, abandoned. The crew is dead, or worse, they've fled. A section of the defensive line simply disappears. And that's all it takes. One opening, one break in the chain. Further east, at Gold and Juno beaches, British and Canadian forces are already pushing inland. Why? Because those sectors were less fortified. Fewer bunkers, fewer obstacles, wider gaps. The wall wasn't evenly built. Couldn't be. Too much coastline, too few resources, too many assumptions. Even worse, some units defending these sectors aren't elite German troops at all. They're static divisions, older men, foreign conscripts, prisoners forced into service. Units with limited mobility, poor training, and low morale. They weren't meant to fight a full invasion. They were meant to delay it. But delay only works if reinforcements arrive in time. Back at Omaha, 5:41 a.m., Karl hears shouting behind him. He turns. German officers are arguing, loud, panicked. Where are the reserves? Why hasn't Panzergruppe been deployed? No orders from headquarters. No orders. Because the German command structure assumes this might still be a diversion. A feint. The real invasion, according to their belief, will come later. Somewhere else. And so the wall fights alone. Fragmented. Disconnected. Each bunker. Each trench. Each unit. Isolated. This is the true cost of Flaw 1. When the wall is attacked, it doesn't respond as a single force. It fractures. Into pockets. Into chaos. Into silence. Karl reloads again, hands shaking. He looks out over the beach. The Americans are still coming. Closer now. Much closer. And for the first time, he realizes something terrifying. If they reach the base of the cliffs, if they get past the beach, there is no second wall behind him. No fallback line. No deeper fortress. Just roads. Fields. France. Because the Atlantic Wall wasn't designed to absorb a breakthrough. It was designed to prevent one entirely. And once that prevention fails, everything behind it is exposed. A grenade lands near Karl's position. He doesn't see who threw it. He doesn't hear it over the noise. He only feels the blast. And then, nothing. By 6:30 a.m., the first cracks in the Atlantic Wall have become breaches. Small, fragile, but real. And through those openings, an army begins to pour in. Flaw 1 has done its damage. But worse is coming. Because even where the wall was strong, it was built for the wrong kind of war. June 6, 1944, 6:58 a.m., above Omaha Beach. Smoke clings to the cliffs like a living thing. The air tastes of salt, cordite, and blood. Below, the beach is chaos. Burning landing craft, shattered bodies, men pinned behind obstacles, officers screaming orders no one can hear. But something has changed. The killing is no longer one-sided. A small group of American soldiers, mud-soaked, shaken, half-deaf, press themselves against the base of the cliffs. Among them is a lieutenant clutching a map that's already useless. He looks up. The wall towers above him. Concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, artillery positions carved into the rock. From a distance, it looks unstoppable. From here, he sees something different. Angles, gaps, blind ground. Move, he shouts, and they start climbing. Back inside the German defenses, the situation is deteriorating. Machine gun positions that were perfectly placed to fire onto the beach cannot adjust fast enough to fire down the cliffs. Artillery pieces locked into fixed casemates struggle to hit targets that are now too close. The Atlantic Wall was engineered to destroy an enemy approaching from the sea, not one already beneath it. This is Flaw 2. The wall was designed for a single phase of battle, and failed the moment the battle changed. Months earlier, February 1944, inspection tour Normandy. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel walks through a newly completed bunker. The concrete is thick. The firing slit faces perfectly toward the waterline. A German engineer beams with pride. Impenetrable, Herr Feldmarschall. Rommel steps up to the slit, looks out, then he turns. Can it fire behind us? The engineer hesitates. No, it is not designed for that. Rommel nods slowly. He's seen this before. In North Africa, in Italy, fortifications that dominate one direction, but collapse the moment the enemy adapts. The Atlantic Wall is full of these positions. Massive, reinforced, deadly, but rigid, static. Back to Omaha. 7:12 a.m. The first American soldiers reach the top of the cliffs. Not in waves, not in formation, in scattered, desperate groups. But it doesn't matter. They're here. And once they're here, everything changes. A German machine gun crew, focused on the beach below, suddenly hears footsteps behind them. They turn. Too late. A burst of gunfire cuts them down. Their bunker, once a fortress, is now a liability. A trap. This is the problem with fixed defenses. They are strongest before contact, but weakest after penetration. Further inland, confusion spreads. German units receive fragmented reports. Enemy on the beach. Enemy at the wire. Enemy in the trenches. Enemy behind us. None of it makes sense. Because according to the design of the wall, that last one should be impossible. But it isn't. Because the Allies didn't fight the battle the wall was built for. They changed it. Naval bombardment softened the defenses. Airborne troops disrupted communications and reinforcements. Engineers cleared obstacles. Infantry adapted on the fly using terrain, improvisation, and sheer will to break through. The wall expected a direct assault. What it got was chaos. Karl Weiss is gone now. His position silent. His bunker still intact, but irrelevant. Because the battle has moved past it. Around it. Through it. At 7:45 a.m., a German officer tries to organize a counterattack near Omaha. He gathers what men he can. Fragments of different units, shaken, disoriented. They move toward the beach. Then they stop. Because what they see isn't a failed invasion. It's a foothold. American troops are digging in, establishing positions, bringing in more men, more weapons, more momentum. And the wall can't push them back. Because it was never designed to counterattack, only to resist. Meanwhile, inland roads remain open, not because Germany didn't expect to use them, but because they assumed they'd have time. Time to deploy reserves, time to organize, time to react. They were wrong. The final, devastating truth of Flaw 2 is this. The Atlantic Wall relied on the idea that the enemy would be destroyed before adaptation became necessary. But war doesn't work that way. By mid-morning, the battle for the beaches is no longer about survival. It's about expansion, breaking out, pushing inland. And every meter gained makes the wall weaker. Because every meter gained turns its guns, its bunkers, its carefully engineered defenses, into obstacles facing the wrong direction. Some German units fight to the last man. Others retreat. Many simply lose contact and dissolve into the chaos. And still, reinforcements don't arrive in time. Because behind both of these flaws, behind the gaps, behind the rigid design, there is a third failure. One that no amount of concrete could fix. A failure of command. A failure of decision. A failure measured not in meters, but in hours. And those hours will decide the fate of the Atlantic Wall. June 6, 1944, 8:32 a.m. German High Command, Western Front. The map table is covered in pins. Red for German units. Blue for reported enemy landings. The blue pins are multiplying. Fast. Too fast. An officer wipes sweat from his forehead as another report comes in. Enemy forces advancing inland at multiple sectors. Another voice cuts in. Airborne units confirmed behind our lines. Silence follows. Then the question no one wants to answer. Is this the main invasion? Because everything depends on that answer. Back on the beaches of Normandy, the battle has already shifted. At Omaha, American forces, bloodied but unbroken, are pushing up the bluffs. At Gold, Juno, and Sword, British and Canadian troops are moving inland with increasing momentum. The D-Day landings are no longer in doubt. They are succeeding. But success here doesn't just depend on soldiers. It depends on time. This is flaw 3. The Atlantic Wall required rapid, decisive reinforcement. But the system controlling those reinforcements was paralyzed. Months earlier, spring 1944, France. German strategy is divided. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel argues that any invasion must be crushed at the beaches. Immediately, violently, before the enemy can establish a foothold. He wants armored divisions, panzer units, positioned close to the coast, ready to strike within minutes. But others disagree. Senior commanders believe the main invasion will come at Pas-de-Calais. They argue that committing reserves too early could be a mistake. They want the panzer divisions held back, centrally located, ready to respond once the true invasion site is confirmed. And above them all, one man holds the final authority: Adolf Hitler. Hitler makes the decision. The most powerful armored reserves will not move, unless he personally orders it. Back to June 6th, morning. Hitler is asleep. At 9:15 a.m., desperate requests begin reaching headquarters. Release the panzer divisions. Enemy breakthrough at multiple beaches. Immediate counterattack required. But no one dares wake him. Not yet, because there is still doubt, still uncertainty, still the belief that this might be a diversion. And that belief isn't baseless, because the Allies have spent months building an illusion. Fake armies, fake radio traffic, dummy tanks, a deception campaign so effective it convinces German intelligence that the real invasion will come later. Pas-de-Calais. So even as soldiers fight and die in Normandy, German command hesitates. 10 a.m., 11 a.m., no full-scale counterattack, no massed armored response, only fragmented movements, delayed orders, confusion. By the time Hitler finally authorizes the release of key panzer divisions, it's too late. Back on the ground. 11:47 a.m., near Omaha. American troops are no longer just surviving. They are advancing, linking up, securing positions, bringing in artillery, establishing supply lines. The window has closed, because the Atlantic Wall was never meant to fight alone. It was meant to hold, until mobile forces arrived to crush the invasion. But those forces were delayed, held back by indecision, by rigid command structures, by one critical flaw: centralized control in a moment that demanded speed. A German officer watches as Allied troops move inland. He knows what this means. Even if the wall holds in places, even if some bunkers remain operational, the line is broken, and once broken, cannot be restored. By evening, the beaches of Normandy are no longer contested landing zones. They are Allied strongholds. Men, tanks, supplies, reinforcements, an unstoppable flow pouring into France. The Atlantic Wall still exists. Its bunkers still stand. Its guns still fire. But it no longer matters, because the battle it was built to win is already lost. In the weeks that follow, Allied forces push deeper into occupied Europe. The wall is bypassed, surrounded, rendered irrelevant. A massive, expensive monument to a flawed strategy. Germany had spent the equivalent of billions, in today's terms, over $160 billion, to build a defense that failed in 3 critical ways. It wasn't continuous, it wasn't adaptable, and it wasn't supported in time. 3 flaws, each survivable on its own, together, fatal. And on that cold morning in June 1944, on the beaches of Normandy, those flaws were exposed. Not in theory, not on paper, but in fire, in blood, in hours that changed the course of history. The wall did not fall all at once. Cracked, then fractured, then collapsed under the weight of reality. And with it, the illusion of an unbreakable Nazi fortress disappeared forever.